The sky over Nashville was heavy with clouds that morning, the kind that warned of a storm but couldn't decide when to start. Inside a small recording studio on the edge of town, Ethan Cole sat behind a mixing desk, sipping cold coffee and scrolling through his endless list of demo files. He was tired, not just physically but deep inside. Ethan had been in the music industry for more than 10 years. In his early days, music felt like magic. Every new voice, every song idea felt like something sacred. But over time, that feeling faded. He had listened to hundreds of singers, all chasing the same dream. Most sounded similar, some were decent, but very few were special. The constant search for the next big thing had turned into a routine, and Ethan no longer believed in surprises. That Tuesday, he didn't plan to meet anyone new. He wanted to finish mixing a project, close early, and maybe take a walk before the rain came. But a friend from a local music cafe called him saying, "Hey, there's this girl who just came to town. She sings. Real talent, I think. Do me a favor, give her a few minutes." Ethan almost said no. He had heard that line too many times before. Real talent. Everyone said that about someone they knew, but his friend had done him a favor once, so he agreed. "Fine, tell her to come by this afternoon," he said without much interest. A few hours later, the studio door opened quietly. A young woman stepped in, early 20s maybe. She had a guitar case slung over her shoulder, and her shoes were a little wet from the drizzle outside. Her name was Lena Morales. Her clothes were simple, her voice soft when she introduced herself. Ethan gave her a polite nod and motioned toward the stool near the microphone. "Go ahead," he said flatly. "Play me something." He didn't mean to sound rude, but years of disappointment had made his tone cold. He had learned not to expect much. Lena noticed it right away. The way his eyes looked past her instead of at her. The way his voice carried no warmth. She had seen that look before. She'd been singing since she was a teenager, performing at small cafes, bars, and even weddings back in her hometown. People liked her voice, but Nashville was different. Here, everyone sang. Everyone dreamed. Still, she wasn't there to impress him. She was there because she had to sing. It was something she couldn't stop doing even if she tried. She sat down, opened her guitar case, and took out an old acoustic guitar that had clearly been through a lot. Its paint was scratched, its strings slightly worn. Ethan noticed and thought, amateur guitar, amateur dreams. But then she adjusted the mic herself, tuned the strings carefully, and took a deep breath. The first sound that came from her guitar was soft but steady, one clean chord that seemed to echo around the small room. Then she started to sing. The first note caught Ethan off guard. It wasn't loud or showy, but it had something he hadn't heard in a long time. Truth. Her voice carried emotion that didn't need background music or fancy effects. It was raw, natural, and deeply human. She sang a song she'd written herself, about leaving home, about missing her mother's kitchen light, about chasing something that might never come true. The words were simple, but the way she sang them made them feel heavy, real, and personal. Ethan stopped moving. His arms, which had been crossed, dropped slowly. He found himself watching her closely now, every note hitting a place in him he thought had gone numb years ago. He forgot about his coffee, his schedule, everything. It was just her voice filling the room. For the next 4 minutes, he didn't interrupt, didn't adjust the sound levels, didn't say a word. When the song ended, Lena's hand stayed on the guitar for a second longer, waiting for him to speak. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that only happens when something real has just happened. Ethan finally exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath. "What? What song was that?" he asked quietly. "It's mine," Lena said. "I wrote it a few months ago." He nodded slowly. "You wrote that?" "Yes, it's called The Porch Light." He leaned back in his chair, his expression softening. He didn't say it out loud, but he was stunned. The girl he had written off within seconds had just reminded him what it felt like to believe in music again. "Do you have more?" he asked after a pause. Lena smiled a little, relieved. "A few." Ethan didn't smile back. Not because he didn't want to, but because he was thinking. Something about her tone, her honesty, stirred memories from his own early career. The nights he used to stay up mixing songs not for money, but for love of sound. He realized how far he'd drifted from that version of himself. They spent the next half hour going through more of her songs. Each one had its flaws. The guitar timing was off sometimes and her pitch wavered in places, but none of that mattered. Every song had heart. Every line had lived experience behind it. When she finished, Ethan looked at her differently. He didn't see a small-town amateur anymore. He saw an artist. He rubbed his face and let out a slow breath. "You know," he said, "I almost didn't meet you today." Lena laughed softly. "Well, I'm glad you did." He nodded, still half lost in thought. "Me too." Outside, the rain had started again, light but steady. Lena packed her guitar, thanked him, and walked out of the studio, not expecting anything more. She had no idea that her simple song had just lit a spark inside the man who'd almost given up on discovering real talent. After she left, Ethan sat in silence for a long time. The notes of her song still played in his head. He replayed the session's recording on his computer, listening again to her voice. There was something so honest about it, so unpolished yet powerful, that it felt like it came straight from her soul. He closed his eyes and smiled for the first time that day. For years, he'd been chasing perfection, perfect sound, perfect lyrics, perfect image. But what he'd just heard wasn't perfect. It was real, and that made it unforgettable. He didn't know yet how much this meeting would change things. He didn't know that within months her voice would reach far beyond that small studio, and that he, the man who had nearly turned her away, would become part of her story. But that was still ahead. For now, there was just the sound of rain outside, the soft glow of studio lights, and the faint echo of a voice that had broken through years of noise and reminded one tired producer what music truly was. Ethan closed his laptop but didn't turn off the lights. He sat back, lost in thought, and whispered to himself, almost in disbelief, "She's special." A few days passed after that rainy afternoon, but Ethan couldn't get the sound of her voice out of his mind. He'd listened to hundreds of singers in his career, but something about Lena's tone stayed with him. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and honesty was rare in music these days. On the fourth day, he gave in. He scrolled through his call list, found her number, and sent a short message. "Hey, it's Ethan from the studio. Can you come back in this week? I'd like to try recording one of your songs properly." He didn't know if she'd reply, but within minutes a message popped up. "Sure, just tell me the time." By Friday she was back, same guitar, same simple clothes, same nervous but determined look in her eyes. The difference this time was that Ethan was ready. The microphones were already set up, the lights adjusted, and the room felt warmer, more alive. "Let's start with the one you sang last time," Ethan said. "The porch light, right?" She nodded and smiled. "Yeah, that one." The recording began. It took a few tries to get it right. Not because she sang badly, but because she sang with feeling. Every time she reached the chorus, her voice cracked slightly. Not from weakness, but from emotion. Ethan didn't stop her. He didn't fix it. He wanted it to stay real. By the end of the day, they had a full demo. He played it back through the speakers, and for a few seconds, they both just listened. The song filled the room again, soft, real, and moving. Lena looked down, her hands in her lap. "Do you think it's good enough?" she asked quietly. Ethan turned toward her. "Good enough?" He smiled a little. "It's more than good enough. It's you. That's what people will feel." It had been a long time since he'd spoken to an artist like that. Not about technique or numbers, but about heart. Over the next few weeks, they met again and again. Some days they worked on new songs. Other days they just talked about music, about life, about where she came from. Lena told him stories about her small town. The quiet evenings, her mother singing in the kitchen. The way she used to play guitar on the porch just to fill the silence. Ethan listened, taking mental notes. Every detail of her life became part of the songs they recorded. Soon, the studio felt less like a workplace and more like a second home. Ethan started coming in earlier, staying later just to mix her tracks. He found himself humming her songs while driving, something he hadn't done in years. One afternoon, while they were listening to a mix, Lena asked softly, "Why are you helping me so much? You didn't even know me a month ago." Ethan paused. He didn't answer right away. "Because," he said finally, "your music reminds me why I started doing this. Somewhere along the way, I forgot what that felt like. You brought it back." She smiled shyly, not sure what to say. Their first real test came when Ethan decided to play her demo for a few label contacts. He was nervous not because he doubted her, but because he knew how the industry worked. People wanted catchy, easy songs, not emotional, slow ones about family and small-town life. When he played The Porch Light in a meeting room, one of the executives leaned back and said, "It's nice, but it's not commercial. Too slow, too personal." Another shrugged. "She has a sweet voice, but we need something radio-ready." Ethan felt the old frustration rising in him. He thanked them for their time, but as soon as he stepped out of the office, he decided something. He wouldn't let her become just another name they ignored. That evening, he called Lena and told her everything. She listened quietly, then laughed softly. "It's okay," she said. "I didn't come here to be famous. I just want people to hear me." That sentence stuck with him. A few days later, he had an idea. "What if we release your song online?" he suggested. "Just us, no label, no rules. We'll upload it and see what happens." She hesitated. "You think anyone will listen?" He smiled. "If they hear your voice, they will." They filmed a simple video, just her sitting on a stool in the studio playing her guitar. No fancy lights, no makeup, no background effects. Ethan uploaded it with a plain title, The Porch Light Original Song. For the first few days, nothing happened. A few hundred views, a handful of comments. But by the end of the week, something changed. Someone shared it on a local radio page. Then another person shared it on a music blog. Within 2 weeks, the video crossed 100,000 views, then 500,000. Ethan couldn't believe it. Neither could she. The comments were full of people saying how the song reminded them of home, of their parents, of lost memories. One person wrote, "This song sounds like something I needed to hear today." Lena cried when she read that comment. Not from sadness, but from the joy of knowing that her voice had reached someone. From there, things began to move quickly. Small radio stations started playing her song. Local newspapers wanted to interview her. A few bigger producers suddenly called Ethan asking about that new girl with the old soul. But Lena stayed the same. Humble, grounded, always thanking people for listening. She never acted like a star. And Ethan, though proud, kept reminding her to protect that honesty. "You'll get a lot of attention now," he told her one evening. "People will want to change things, your look, your style, your songs. Don't let them. Your truth is what made them listen in the first place." She nodded, her eyes shining. "I won't, I promise." Months passed. Her small song grew into something much bigger. One day, she was invited to perform live on a local TV show. Ethan stood behind the cameras as she walked onto the stage, guitar in hand. When she sang that first note, it was just like the first time he'd heard her. Raw, real, and unforgettable. The audience went silent. Some even wiped away tears. After the show, Ethan found her backstage. She was shaking a little, still overwhelmed by the cheers. He placed a hand on her shoulder and said quietly, "You did it." She smiled and replied, "No, we did." He laughed softly, looking at her with pride. "You know," he said, "when I first met you, I thought you were just another amateur. And now?" she asked playfully. "Now," he said, "I think you're the reason I believe in music again." She looked down, touched by his words. That night, as they left the studio together, the city lights reflected off the wet streets. It had rained again, just like the first day they met. Ethan looked up at the sky and thought about how much had changed since that ordinary afternoon, when a tired producer almost turned away a girl with an old guitar. He realized that sometimes, the moments that seem small at first can change everything. One song, one voice, one simple meeting. They can wake something in you that you didn't even know had fallen asleep. For Ethan, it was faith. Faith in music, in truth, and in the power of a single honest note. For Lena, it was the beginning of a dream that had lived quietly inside her for years. As they walked toward their cars, she turned to him and said softly, "Thank you for listening that day." Ethan smiled, his eyes warm. "Thank you," he replied, "for singing." The rain fell softly around them, and somewhere in the distance a street musician strummed a guitar, a reminder that every great story begins the same way, with someone brave enough to sing and someone willing to listen.